and believe me, I had a lot of time to do this. I cannot think of a single time in our world history where a human being was involved where the next best or necessary thing didn't start with the question. And part of me argues it took too long because we weren't asking the right questions.
Okay. Interesting. I'm following you here. So, like, wherever we're at, the next stage of evolution requires a question to be asked.
Right.
And the better the question, the more quickly we can move ourselves along.
Right. And so, I shared a thought this weekend just to highlight something for people. When you start a question with why can't I, why can't we, I'm not sure we take enough time to really understand what it is we just sought. We looked for every excuse in the book why something can't work, and the conversation dies quickly and it's frustrating. What I challenged people to do is take that same thought and start it with, what would it take?
Okay.
What would it take to carry all this fur 10 miles other than on our back? What would it take? It'd probably take a wheel.
Right.
Versus, why can't we carry it? Because it's too heavy. Because it's too, you know what I mean?
Right. That's a really interesting way of reframing the issue. It's kind of like looking at a hurdle, and you say, ugh, why can't I keep going forward? There's this hurdle in my way. There's this object, this mental mindset, this person, this task standing in my way. Instead of why can't I, it's what will it take to overcome this hurdle? What will it take to deal with this person? What will it take to complete this task? And that gears your mindset towards finding solutions instead of excuses.
Right. I talked about serving vulnerable, and I love serving youth. And I mean, think about it. When you talk to kids, if you ask them, why can't you pass this class? You will get no shortage of frustrating answers.
Right.
Ask that same kid, what would it take for you to pass this class? You are now given very important information on what both you and them need. But that's just not about kids. That's about you. That's about relationships. That's about the job. That's about everything.
We'll have to have a whole conversation sometime about the book I read. I finished a book over 4th of July holiday called If You Can Keep It, The Forgotten Promise of American Liberty. And it's about this notion that we have to continually work to keep what makes America great. And he talked about love of country and explored this whole dynamic of loving something that's flawed. And you don't have to love the sin. You can still love the sinner. I mean, there was some theology woven through this, some patriotism. It was interesting. But this idea that you can really, you can center in on the things that make something great and really grow that, focus in on that. And you don't have to necessarily focus on the bad stuff. If we focus on the good stuff, that will grow.
Right.
The good stuff will expand, and if we ignore the bad stuff, maybe ignore is the wrong word, but we don't allow ourselves to become consumed by it.
Right.
And it can start to fade away because we're focused so much on growing the good.
I almost want to give a warning to the show that I have on here. I'm not saying you're going to lose some friends. But if your friends aren't ready to think at another level, it's going to be incredibly frustrating. And I have this Yoda-like ability to call us out on our own stuff because it starts with us, right? So if I were to ask the listening audience right now, for those that think they're better than everybody, my question would be, why is it that we allow saints to have a past, but sinners aren't allowed to have a future?
This is the kind of
See what I'm
question.
saying?
Yeah, this is the kind of question Alonzo asks on his new show, Ask Better Questions with Alonzo Kelly. This is going to be available as a podcast on WHBY.com. It's also going to be airing on the weekends. We'll be promoting the timing and things like that. It's still getting some of these details worked out. But you'll have access to these kinds of insights. Now, Alonzo, tell us a little bit about your method. When you're working with somebody, obviously it's going to be different to be doing sort of broadcast style as opposed to individual work. When you're working with individuals, how do you typically begin that process? Is there some planning that you do? Is it some inventories or exploration? How do you begin working with a client, and then how does that move forward?
Yeah, so I like to start with what's the goal. I can't pretend to help you if I'm not clear on what the goal is. And because of the way that my mind is wired, I believe there's a solution to everything. We just got to get out of our own way. I'm constantly reminding people 293 ways to make change for $1. So what's your goal? And as a result of having accomplished this goal, what's better? you better, the team better, the organization better, relationship better. So it actually starts with a series of questions so that I can help understand. Like I'm not going to pretend to be your local Walgreens or CVS where there's something for everything, preventative, post, during.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll find what it is this person's trying to do.
Right.
What is the goal? And then I like to think of what's going to happen because of that as the why.
Right.
Why are we pursuing this change?
Right.
What is that better outcome we're going after if, in fact, we are successful in achieving this goal? And this has been a similar way that I got started with my coach, is really setting that destination and then working backwards to develop that plan, that roadmap. Individuals can do this stuff themselves, but as we talked about before, having someone that you're talking about this with, having someone who knows what you've said really increases the likelihood of success because you've got that built-in accountability of someone who knows this is what you're trying to do and is going to follow up with you.
Right. And I also believe that we only have the capacity to have so many people in our lives that can do that at once, right? And so, I crack this joke, be aware of what may happen to your circle of influence. There are 4 groups of people in your life. There are people, whatever the goal is, they add to it, they subtract from it, they multiply it, or they divide it, says the accounting guy.
Yeah, right.
So if I want to be happy,
Yeah.
there are people in my life that contribute to my happiness. There are also people, when allowed, subtract from my happiness. There are people in my life who, when I'm happy, they can tell a joke and multiply it.
Right.
And then there are people in my life where I'm happy, I'm not allowed to be that happy. So they divide it up.
Right.
Like, how dare you?
Right. It's amazing the effect people can have on our lives. We often talk about how we are in control. We talk about that on this show in the context of politics and democracy, right? That we, the people, make the rules that we, the people, live by. But we, each of us, also decides the other people we're allowing into our life.
Right.
And we also decide how much we take on. And I want to preview one of the topics for one of the shows that is going to be coming up in July. This is about the myth of the master multitasker. This is one of the topics we covered and have talked about. But I want you to talk a little bit about, a lot of people think they're good at multitasking.
Yeah.
How do you feel about multitasking?
You're not. And
This is Alonzo. He is straightforward and cuts to the point.
no, you're not. And I say congratulations to everybody who believes that they can juggle 500 things at a time. And I'd like to highlight a couple things in terms of how we see that. We talked about it on the show, right? I look at you as like the juggler at the circus who has like 1 cone, and we're not impressed. And then you do 2, and we're like, eh. And then you do 3, and we're like, okay. And then we want another one, and another one. And then what you're not paying attention to, we're all leaning in. We're like, okay, now we want to see it fall.
Right.
Like we're waiting for it.
I can relate to that feeling. I'm sure a lot of our listeners can, yeah.
Right. But now you feel this pressure to never drop anything. And now, because it's so out of control, how do you get to pick and choose which one falls?
Right.
And so there are just too many people involved when I watch people juggling. I also notice you get something done and then you convince yourself you're good at it. You know, as a student, you get that 20-page paper done at the last minute, and then you accidentally convince yourself,
Accidentally.
you know, I can do this.
I work better under the pressure of the deadline, right?
yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, you do not.
Where were you 20 years ago when I was in college, Alonzo? I needed this advice.
Let's see, 20 years ago I was in Oshkosh.
Yeah, so you were around. You were around. So, okay, when listeners are tuning into the show, you provide them with some ways to connect with you. Let's preview some of that. How do people find out more about Alonzo Kelly? Where can they find you?
Yep, so first and foremost, my new family here at WHBY.com. You can find me there.
Yes.
Please go there first. Also, I do contribute to social media. You're not going to find a whole lot of pictures of friends, so let's stick with business. So AlonzoKelly.com is the website. At KLG LLC is Twitter. And then on Facebook, Kelly Leadership Group, and then obviously Alonzo. So
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn too. I noticed a lot of people from Appleton, from our interview, connected with me on LinkedIn.
Interesting.
I got to learn to plug that more.
You know, LinkedIn is one of those that I think some people use a lot. I used to be a lot more active on LinkedIn when I was doing like workforce development and economic development. There's a lot of professionals there. And then I noticed LinkedIn was getting a little, I'll call it polluted with Facebook-style memes and games and things like that. And those aren't terrible, but it just, to me, that's not what I'm looking for at LinkedIn. And so I got to do a little filtering, I think, of my network there. But yeah, we could do a whole episode on LinkedIn sometime, and maybe we will. We're talking with Alonzo Kelly. He is the host of the new show on WHBY called Ask Better Questions with Alonzo Kelly. It'll be premiering this Saturday evening. The podcast will be posted later this week. If you're online, go to WHBY.com right now. Click over to the Fresh Take show page. You can actually see us. We are live streaming video of the show today. We're also doing that live on our Facebook page, WHBY on Facebook. We got one more segment left with Alonzo. We're going to talk about this concept of, quote, self-help, unquote, and the idea of a guru. I want to know if Alonzo is a guru. We'll see what he has to say. And if you've got questions, we welcome them, of course, at 281-1150, 281-1150, or email me, freshtake1150 at gmail.com, freshtake1150 at gmail.com. We'll be back with more with Alonzo Kelly right after this on Fresh Take. You're listening to WHBY. Welcome back to Fresh Take. I'm your host, Josh Duclo. My guest with me is Alonzo Kelly. What up, Alonzo?
Yo.
So Alonzo's hosting a new show on WHBY. It's going to premiere this weekend. It's called Ask Better Questions with Alonzo Kelly. It will be available both as a podcast on WHBY.com and on the air on WHBY, AM 1150 and 103.5 FM. And I want to know, Alonzo, because you're providing insights for people, right? You're a leadership development coach. I think there's people out there, and maybe you've heard this before, who have maybe we'll call it a misperception. We won't say they're wrong. We're just going to say a lot of people have mixed feelings about the concept of self-help or personal coaching, things like that, or the term guru. Right? So under all of that big umbrella of self-help, the guru, the guide, how do you deal with that? How do you feel about that role of being the guru for someone else? Do you embrace that term?
I do not embrace the term guru, but I will tell you this. This is something my mom taught me. When you've had enough, you'll seek help. It doesn't always have to be from a person, but when you've had enough, you'll seek help. And so I've had headaches and never took anything for it.
Right.
I've had knee pain, never took anything for it until I've had enough. So it was at that point that it wasn't about labeling who was helping me, right? Now, I also know that when people run up to me and attempt to diagnose something I haven't expressed as hurting me, that gives it a bad name.
Right.
It's like I'm not an infomercial guy,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. I also know that for me personally, the views expressed on this show, I have a thing about people who have demonstrated a commitment to mastering their craft. Okay, so I never pretended to be an accountant when I graduated from college. Having the diploma does not make me an accountant. What it's demonstrated is a commitment of 4 years to mastering this. That's all it did.
Yeah, the difference between a credential and a demonstrated skill.
Right.
You've put in time and work to learn something, but that doesn't prove that you've applied it.
Yeah.
And those are different things.
Right. And so, I can have all the diplomas in the world and have never applied it. That's why I went and took the corporate job.
Right.
How am I supposed to help people in that environment when I've never experienced it?
Sure.
And I humble myself to redirect when someone asks me to do something that's not in my wheelhouse. And so that's how I separate. But I'm honored that people would call me that. They just might be a little disappointed when I say, you know what, that's just not me though.
Well, but I think that speaks to a level of candor and humility that you bring to your role. Yes, you're trying to help people, right? But you're just providing your personal take, your personal insight. Right. And really, that's a lot of times what we're looking for. That's what I'm looking for from my coach. When I visit with him, I'm saying, here's what I'm thinking today. Here's what I've been working on. Here's what's going well. Here's what I'm struggling with. And he's there to be a sounding board. Right. It's not always about him giving me the ideas. It's about him helping me formulate and sort through my own ideas. Is that what you're doing when you work with individuals?
It is. And then when you pay closer attention to how each of us delivers on this craft, you will notice often I do not tell people what to do.
Right.
I just do not. You will not hear that on Ask Better Questions with Alonzo Kelly. I'm happy that it airs on the weekends out the gate, because you're going to need a couple days just to process what the heck just happened.
Yeah.
I just want you to think. I want people to think. I want people to recognize I cannot make you do something. I maybe physically could, but
Sure.
that's not a good move.
And when you see Alonzo, if you're checking out our video stream, you'll see he could make you do things. I'm a big guy. He can make me do things because he's a really strong guy. Actually, we both ran that Spartan race a couple weekends ago.
We call it running?
Yeah, well, we completed. Or as I say, I survived the Spartan race. I think that's what we can agree on. So, yeah, as you mentioned, Ask Better Questions with Alonzo Kelly is going to start airing Saturday night, this coming Saturday. That's July 8th. We'll be airing them every week. Following that kickoff this Saturday, we're going to post the podcasts on our website. They'll be available on all your social media channels as well. So you can stream the podcast on demand when you want it. You can listen on the air if you can catch it there on the car, or whether you're relaxing in the living room. Of course, when we've got sports and things, this might move around, so we can't tell you exactly when it'll always be played. But we'll be trying to promote those times.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Go ahead.
Are you really going to bump me for a Packer game?
Packers, absolutely. But Saturday nights, that's not going to be the problem. It's an issue that maybe is going to come up with Brewers games occasionally when they play Saturday nights, although most of the time the weekends are day games, so hopefully there won't be a big problem. But one last final thought on this. Yeah. It's about setting the ego aside, Alonzo. It's about setting the ego aside, accepting help from someone like Alonzo, from a personal coach. Maybe Alonzo needs some help. I'll be your coach,
I don't know
buddy.
what that means.
I'll be your coach. You've got a couple. Maybe you could use one more. Getting insights and coaching through the airwaves here on WHBY. It's Ask Better Questions with Alonzo Kelly kicking off this weekend. And Alonzo, I couldn't be happier to have you be part of the WHBY family.
Yeah,
so glad you were here, not only to announce the new show, but to test drive our new video streaming feature. Such a big day here. Exciting announcements, all kinds of good stuff happening. Appreciate you being a part of it.
Thank you. Special shout out to Mary, who made this happen. I know you're watching.
Awesome. Gotta love that. And we'll be back with more. We're talking fireworks after the news. You've been waiting for it. Now is the time. If you've got thoughts you want to get in on it, call us, 281-1150, or email me, freshtake1150 @gmail.com. More Fresh Take coming up right after this.